And then she's going to start with this BG alley dot, so the bubblegum alley. She's going to start with that. So you want to select that image, and now you want to look at the camera raw just to get some information. I think actually just clicking on it gives you all this information, the metadata right here, which is great. I don't need to go through it, but you can see the file, the dimensions, the pixels per inch, all of this. In addition, this is fun. Focal length that it was taken at, aperture it was taken at, camera used. Anyway, so there's that. Now, you want to look at this in RAW to maybe adjust the colors. Remember, if you're going to triage, you need to know what's wrong with it. But if you wanted to look at this in RAW, you essentially just click this button right here. Open in Camera Raw, which is right here. And it's going to give you all this ability to adjust your exposure. If the image was too bright, too light, you could adjust your exposure here, which is all dealing with the camera. Contrast, highlights, shadows, you can adjust all this stuff here if you want. We're not going to spend much time on this, but this is where you could adjust your exposure. Once again, you have to know what's wrong before you can adjust anything. But let's go ahead and open this in Photoshop. And open it in Photoshop and turn this into a Smart Shop object. All you're going to do is hold your Shift key down and click Open Object. That'll open it in Photoshop as a Smart Object. And you can see it's a Smart Object here. So with this Bubblegum Alley, essentially all we're going to do is add a smart filter, some blur, and then we'll add a gradient mask to give it some dimension. So this is my interpretation of what she means. I don't know exactly, but this is how I would go about it. So the first thing I'm going to do is add the Gaussian blur. And I'm just going to go into blur, Gaussian. And it's up to you how much you want to blur it out. I'm just going to blur it out about 6.8 pixels. That's fine for me. You can turn your preview on and off and hit OK. Boom, you can see there's my smart filter. Now, actually, I'm going to back that up because what I want to do is make a copy.
Did you do an adjustment layer for that filter?
No, I'm going to make a copy of this image first.
So why'd you do the filter through there then, instead of the adjustment layer filter?
You can't put adjustment layers don't have filters on them.
Oh, they don't? Okay.
Yeah, it's just you can adjust your exposure through these, or you've got these various ones here. But in order to use a filter, you've got to go to filter.
Got it.
And now I'm going to put that Gaussian blur on. So
it.
I made a copy of the image. So that's great.
Why'd you make a copy?
I made a copy of the image. So what we're going to do is we're going to add this gradient mask on. And what I want to do is show some of the actual image without the blur and some of the image with the blur so that it gives it dimension. And the best way to go about this, now I could use the best way to go about this is to throw a gradient mask on this. So that's why I made a copy. I'm going to put the gradient mask on top of the copy. When I put the gradient mask on, it's going to reveal some of the image underneath. So on that top layer, I'm just going to go ahead and add a mask. Remember, a mask is just looks like your photo button down here in your layers panel. So just hit the photo button to add a mask, and it's simply going to put a mask on. I'm going to apply the gradient now to that mask. So essentially what you want to do is let's just have our black and white. Let's switch our black and white. Have black on top, white on the bottom. Remember your DX keys allow you to switch your colors back and forth. Then we're going to essentially just choose the paint bucket tool and then look for your gradient tool. Click that.
Paint bucket to gradient.
Yeah. Make sure that we're set black to white here. It might be white to black, but let's experiment here. Make sure you're on your mask as well. So now when I add the gradient, if I just click and pull, it's going to, you see what happened here? It just blurred out the amount. It left the amount underneath that I pulled out in my gradient. So if I back up a little bit and I pulled out this even further, make the line even further with my gradient tool, it's going to expose more of the image underneath as well. So it's a nice thing.
Show me again how you did the gradient tool.
All you do is click and pull.
Click and pull, okay. And then how do you change the gradient? Once you can just go to history panel.
Or you just hit Command Z to go back. Or Command Option Z to go back multiple times. Or your history panel. But now you could also pull it from the top down, which would then give you more of a horizontal feel. It's up to you how much you want to blur it out.
And you can change it to radial, I think, too, right?
Yeah, I don't know that would look as good, but so radial is...
That one, I think that one is. So then, cool.
Yeah, so it's up to you. Cool. So what that is doing is just adding some dimension.
So now we got the grumpy man.
All right, so there's that. We're done with that. Make sense?
That makes sense. Thank you.
All right, so let's go and find the grumpy man. So going back to bridge here, here's the grumpy man.jpg. So once again, I could look at the image data. There isn't any image metadata in that, but that's okay. Just open it in camera raw. If I wanted to adjust it in the exposure looks great on this image. Very professional
Is
looking.
this the only way to open an image is from camera raw?
No. You could just open it in Photoshop if you wanted to.
Can you show me how?
Well, you know how to open. So while we're in Photoshop, let's just go to File, Open.
No. I think from Bridge you can just open it in Photoshop. I want to know how to open it from Bridge in Photoshop without doing camera raw.
Right click. Just right click on the image, open in Photoshop.
Cool.
That's it. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to change the background to a different color by making a selection of him. We need to refine the edges because whenever you're dealing with hair, it's really hard to get those edges without getting parts of the background. I'm going to initially just turn this into a smart object. You can turn it into a smart object. In this case, I'm not going to bother with it, but just to let you know, you could. It's up to you. So essentially, we need to use the quick selection tool here. This is the best tool to select people. It's W on your keyboard as well, but it's the fourth tool down from the top. Now I could just paint the subject out, by just pulling over him like this. It's going to do a pretty good job, and that works fine. That's perfectly fine. You can also just use the select subject, which is just a way to cheat, but hey, makes life easier. It's up to you, whichever one you want to do.
But it doesn't get all the hair anyway.
It doesn't get all the hair. But now if I wanted to go in and refine this a little bit, I could try to refine the edges. Remember, I can make my brush size smaller or larger by using the brackets. But I could, add a little bit try to get some of the hair in there. And remember, minus will get rid of part of the selection as well. But I think probably the easiest way to do this at this point.
Minus gets rid of part of the selection? Where?
Or, I'm sorry, Option key will get part of a selection. But I think the best way to do this is to go to Select and Mask. And essentially what that's going to do is it's going to pull up this more or less what I call refined edges. And now I can see what's actually being selected. Now you can change your view mode to marching ants, to overlay, whatever you prefer to get the...
How did you get there?
Just from the select and mask I hit earlier.
Oh,
all of this is in select and mask, but I'm just going to stick with the onion skin. Now, these are kind of arbitrary. I'm not going to go through what these do, but what these tools do here is they kind of help you refine the edge or your selection. So I'm just going to turn the smart radius on and just pull it up a little bit. You can see it's trying to figure out the edges a little bit better. Oh, actually, that's not looking bad. I'm also going to just try to smooth my selection a little bit. This is arbitrary. You can just kind of play with it to see what you like. I always like to feather my selections as well, and you can just experiment with all of these tools. Try not to feather too much.
How do you use those?
I'll get there.
Okay.
And once you do feather, you always want to add a little contrast back in because it's taking away, it's making it kind of blurry, so it adds a little bit of the white back in. All right, now, if I want to kind of refine those edges a little more, I can go in with my refine edge brush. And essentially what this does is it allows me just to kind of paint around the edges, and Photoshop will try to do a good job of selecting the edge a little bit more. So I'm just going to paint here a little bit, and it's going to try to make that selection a little bit better.
So the plus actually takes stuff away.
No, the minus would take stuff away.
Well, you're on the plus.
Yeah, so the plus is trying to refine the edge more.
But it looks like it's taking away the blue.
All right, well that's what we want.
Yeah.
So if you can see the minus restores original edge, plus expands detection area. You could also just use, go in with the brush tool and try to make the tighter selection tool. So it's up to you. You just kind of want to play around with it a little bit. See if you can get the selection a little bit tighter. And remember your space bar, your best friend, allows you to kind of look around the image. It looks pretty good on him. It's really just that hair, so try to spend a little time on it. It's not making a huge amount of difference. I think it's kind of hard to do.
Okay, let's go. Let's continue on. Because now we have to do the changing the background.
Okay, so there we've got our selection made. Now, one of the things I like to do that's really easy is if you just change this to create a new layer with the layer mask on it. And it's just output to. So create a new layer with the layer mask on it and hit OK. And it's essentially just going to push that push this out to a new layer.
So you have your old one, you could get rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then how do you change the background?
Yeah, I forgot how to do that. Hold on 1 second. Let me just...
It's almost like you reversed it.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to back up here. I've got my selection. Actually, I'm going to go back to my selected mask and just do this again real quick. Feather, contrast. All right, that's good for now. And I'm just going to leave it as OK just to make the selection. So instead of selecting onto mask, I'm just leave it as that. Now, to change that background, I'm going to inverse my selection. So I'll inverse it or Command I. And
what was that under? Anyway?
Just select.
Inverse.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I'm going to add an adjustment layer to change the background to the hue and saturation. So I'm going to add an adjustment mask or layer mask, the hue and saturation. And now I'm going to colorize that. And it allows me to simply change my background. Whatever color you want, it's up to you. And we're good. So we've changed the background. I noticed on the ear here, I've got a little bit of an issue. Some of this in here. So
go back to the mask.
On my mask, I'm going to just see what I can do just to kind of paint that out real quick.
Do you use the white to...
Yeah, white to or black to block, white to reveal, and so this is blocking it.
Okay.
All right, so that cleaned that up. Now, really quick, let's say this guy's got to be careful with how much you retouch an image. You don't want to ever change the meaning of an image, but there's some pretty bad crow's feet going on in this dude's face. So there's different ways we could change this, but probably the easiest way is to use the spot healing tool, which is your 6th tool down, 7th tool down. Not the spot healing tool, I'm sorry, the healing brush tool is probably the best way to go. And what this will allow us to do is basically take a sample of around the area that we want to change and then kind of paint that in. But the cool thing about this tool is not only is it taking a sample, but like the clone tool, but why it's better is it's taking a sample, but it's also where I click to paint in, it's also matching the color of where I'm painting. So it's mixing the clone and painting the same color of where I'm putting it. So that's what makes this more powerful than the clone tool. If you have edges that you want to adjust, the clone tool is better, but this tool is amazing. So hold Option down to where you want to sample, get as close as to where you're trying to sample. Hit click, hold your Option, click, it's going to take your sample. Now just paint it in. You got to make sure you're on the right layer though. Now you might, if it seems like a little bit much to you, this is one of the best things you can do, is you can fade that. Go to Edit, Fade Healing Brush. I think it's Command Shift F. Remember that, that's huge. Because every time you do this, you kind of want to kind of fade it. And if you notice here, I like to fade it to about 60%. So I'm getting enough of the original with my, so here's none. Here's with me fading it in. So it's mixing it in much better, and it's not looking like, completely destructive. So you can kind of play with that slider. So a little bit there. And let's just not be too destructive.
She said to show it basic touch-ups on a non-destructive layer. Do you know how to do that? And if we don't know how to do it, it's okay.
Oh, yes. So let's create a new layer. And I'm going to move that below the hue and saturation. Now, to make these non-destructive edits, what you're going to do is use that same tool, but make sure right here that you have current and below. So it's going to select the things below it. If you have the current layer, which is an empty layer, there's nothing it's going to select. But if you have current and below selected, it's going to select that. Now, it's going to select from the layer below, so I can hold my Option key down. I'm going to get close to that skin as I can. Click right here and paint that in. Remember Shift, Command, F to fade it a little bit so it mixes in a little bit better, and OK. So now if I'm going to do one more. I'm going to try to get rid of this option. Shift, Command, F, fade it a little bit. So now when I turn that layer on and off, you can see the work I've done, and it's non-destructive. All right, so final thing here. Let's just say you wanted to get rid of some of these marks, or you got some pimples. Same idea. Option, really close, click, paint over it.
The spot healing is good too, right?
Yeah. I think this one, why this one's really good is because it allows you to take a sample. The spot healing is actually figuring it out itself.
Oh, okay. So how is this different than the clone stamp?
The clone stamp tool, it basically it takes a sample. This is taking a sample, but it's also mixing in the color of where you're painting.
Got it.
So it's grabbing both of those and giving you a much better result. With the clone tool, you'll use it, then you'll have to go use the healing tool to blend it in. Mm-hmm. So that's why this is more powerful. But the clone tool works really good when you have things that have edges on them. Mm-hmm. So that is that. We're done with that. Make sense? Mm-hmm. That's it. So really, it's just the spot healing tool and making the background. That's really what you're doing here. And I think it's important to think about fading that stuff in. All right, so we're done with that. Moving on. I'm going to go to the last one, and then we're going to pause. So let's go to the ball game one, which is right here. And I'm just going to right-click on that. Open with Photoshop. This is my husband. So what I want to do here is, according to this, I want to give depth to this. So create a mask with a smart filter, add a glossy and blur to the background. Show other edits in final edit. They can do if they have time. So let's just kind of do similar to what we did with the alley. We're going to select him, and well, first we're going to add a new layer. I'm sorry. We're going to copy that layer. And remember, I think Command J will duplicate, or you can drag it to the new item thing. So what I want to do, first of all, is select him to isolate him, and then I'm going to blur out everything behind him. So, and I'm going.
So you select him with
the quick selection tool is always the best. Now, if he was the only subject in here, I might choose other people, but I'm going to quickly kind of paint over him to select him. I might zoom in a little bit and clean this selection up. I notice that I have this person's face here, so by holding the Option key, that allows me to minus that part of that selection. I've got her blue in here, once again minus, and that's going to help me get that edge much tighter. I've got this red in here, which I don't want, Option again, and that's looking better. I'm actually going to try to get that a little tighter. The rim of the hat there. Oops, and I lost it, so that's okay. I can always use that Option. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now I could go to refine edges here.
Is that through select and mask?
Select and mask. I think I'll do that real quick. And I'm just going to do some really quick arbitrary. I'm going to pull the smart radius up. I'm going to check the box for the smart radius. And I'm actually not seeing my edges as well as I like. I'm going to turn off that background and do it again. Select the mask. There, that's better. Turn up my radius a little bit to kind of, it'll just find the edge and detect it a little bit better. I'm going to smooth my selection, add a little feather so the selection doesn't have rough edges, put in a little contrast pack, and this time I am going to output, I'm just going to put a layer mask on the output and hit OK. Alright, so there we go. Now, what I'm going to do on that initial layer, I could have turned it into a smart object, always not a bad idea, because it's non-destructive edit, but on that initial layer, actually I will just turn it to a smart object. Remember, you can always just right click and go convert to smart object on the initial layer. Don't need to worry so much on the top layer. Now I'm going to add that Gaussian blur back in on that layer, and actually I might just turn this off real quick. Filter, Gaussian blur, I had chosen it before so it comes up. And I'm really going to want to blur this out because I want the man and the subject to really pop out. It's as if I was taking a photo and I wanted to create bokeh, which means blurring out the background. That's a shallow depth of field. I'm going to hit OK. Now when I turn this photo on, I've just got him. And I've created this nice kind of depth with blurring out the background. So that's how you might create a shallow depth of field. Now notice here I do have an issue. I have, right in the middle here, I can see that this is not blurred out, and I want this blurred out. So I can just go back to my mask, and make sure you have your brush selected. Remember, you can change the size with the brackets. Left and right bracket will change your size. And then I can just remember black to block.
To block the mask, or
Yeah,
I thought it was black to reveal, white to conceal.
It's the other way around.
Oh.
Well, just remember, if you ever get it wrong, you can always just
black to block.
And then I can come in tighter here, and just if I want to try to get this a little bit, a little bit better. And I may have feathered a little bit too much. It's coming up here, but I think for right now, for this case, it's okay. Might be a little bit too much feather on my selection.
Can you undo that by going back into the mask thing?
I don't, no.
Can you do, it says refine selected mask.
Oh yeah, so I guess I could go back here. But it didn't save my settings.
Oh, it didn't save them. Okay.
Yeah, so I might have to just make that layer mask again if I want to just maybe not feather it as much.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, there you go. That's how you create a nice depth of field.
Well, what's the create mask, smart filter, and add Gaussian blur? What's a smart filter?
That's what we did with the Gaussian blur. That was the smart filter.
Is this a smart filter?
Yeah, you just go to filter, choose blur, Gaussian blur, and that will put a smart filter on. It used to be that I think there was categories here that said smart filter, but now once you've made it a smart object, it just automatically is a smart filter.
Got it.
So I lowered my Gaussian blur that a little bit. That kind of helps out, take some of that sparkle edge off.
So I won't need you to make a quick time of the other one because I'm just taking notes. Because I'm not going to have time to watch any of this.